Okay, guys. So today is going to be the last chapter that I'm going to be teaching you guys, or going through it, you're presenting to you. And then from next week, we will be having you guys taking over the reins of running the class. Um, I hope that the groups are relatively interested and curious as to how things will proceed. And I look forward to seeing the student contributions in this section. So today, however, we are dealing with um, chapter 3. So let me just get myself set and then set up for sound and for images. Right. Are you guys seeing this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
good.
sir.
All right. So today we're looking at chapter 3. And in chapter 3, what we're really going to be doing is we're looking at the introduction of the relational leadership model, as a model for you to consider in the development of your own personal leadership philosophy. That's basically the idea here. So we're not saying you have to use this model, but we want to present this model in sufficient detail for you to bring it in for consideration purposes in terms of your development. Um, and we are going to be using some of its approaches across the board. So in the relational leadership model, there's some assertions that they begin with, that leadership has to do with relationships, and it's a role that we can't overstate. The importance of a good leader can't be understated or overstated. And there is an inherent um, relational process or communal process involved with the development of leaders. All right. And the last element that they're talking about here is leadership always depends upon the context, but the context is established by the relationships, which is probably one of the things that has this kind of chicken and eggs type of discussion that we can have. Context determines the way in which we develop our relationships, and therefore has an overall impact upon the nature of your relationship with the people who take up leadership positions or the leadership positions that you establish. So, and this has to do with, okay, when you're in school as a student, you might have established your relationships have been established by the actions of your teachers. Um, in your peer groups, where you may have been in a leadership position, similarly, given the context that you're operating in, at your job sites, where you work, if you are in charge of a section, or you're subordinate in a particular organization, the nature of where you are, the type of work that you're involved in, also these things become um, inherent in the way in which leadership comes up. For those of you who participate in any form of what's the word I want to use? Uh, Social types of groupings. This is also something that you could look at as well in terms of trying to evaluate the statements that are being made here and its relative veracity in terms of the real world around you. So those are some of the things I'd like you to look at. So remembering here, the definition of leadership is a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. Now, the definition is very specific in terms of the type of change we're looking at. Positive is the nature of the change, and that positiveness will be determined by the ethical values and standards that we share as a group working with each other as we start to look at the development. Relational leadership involves a focus on five primary components. Um, it is purposeful and builds commitment towards positive purposes that are inclusive of people and diverse points of view. Empowers those involved, is ethical, and recognizes all four of these elements are accomplished accomplished by being process oriented. So this is a representation of that. And one of the things I want to do is I want to use a short video for you guys to be able to see, to get a kind of more nutshell type of explanation for this. So let me know if you're hearing.
Today, we will be looking at the relational leadership
All
model.
right, you guys hearing that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This inclusive model was created in the 1980s with college students in mind. The relational leadership model is a conceptual in nature. It offers insights into how leadership best emerges through a group processes that emphasizes the importance of relationships. Its authors, Comaves, Lucas, McMahon, frame leadership as learnable and able to occur within and outside positional roles. Relational leadership requires a way of engaging with the world in which the leader holds themselves as always morally accountable to others. Now, let's dive deeper into this model. There are 5 aspects to this model that will make it easier to understand. The first aspect of this model is that it is purposeful. It commits to goals through collaborative approaches that identify common ground and a shared vision that can be clearly communicated to motivate collective action between members. Next, this model is inclusive. It engages the complexity of diverse perspectives, experiences, and social identities, and has the desire to expand equity, emphasize empathy, and involves external stakeholders. This model is also empowering. It operates at the individual level through claiming the legitimacy of one's involvement, encourages others to do the same, and actively works to lessen barriers that could perhaps prevent others from getting involved. Ethics is also emphasized in this model. Ethical and moral values serve as group standards that guide decision making. Lastly, this model is process oriented. It has processes for greeting the group, developing and maintaining cohesion, and acting collaboratively to achieve mission driven goals. As a whole, all individuals are involved in the group leadership process. All 4 elements are accomplished by being process oriented. This model calls for leaders to be knowledgeable, aware of themselves and others, and to act. So, how do we apply this concept? The model serves as a platform for reshaping informal theories of leadership that replicate and reinforce dominant norms, leader centricity, and command and control approaches. The relational leadership model responds to the question, leadership for what? With an emphasis on creating positive change. The model is reliant on its explicit inclusion of a commitment to being ethical that steers leadership outcomes towards pro social goals. The model explicitly acknowledges concepts such as power, inclusion, and ethics. One major weakness of the model is that it is aspirational in nature, making it challenging to translate to practice. Unlike many of the leadership theories, there has been no dedicated research on this model. Overall, this leadership theory emphasizes how the relationships formed between group members can change leadership outcomes.
Okay. Um, so before we move forward, I think Miss Phipps came in. Welcome. Um, Anybody has any questions they want to ask about that? I think this little presentation is going to make this chapter rule a lot faster for us, because we they have the entire thing. So these are the 5 different elements that make up the the model across the board. Let me just turn my camera off so we can get this run properly. All right. Um, so we have everything is going to be process oriented. So we have the purpose, we have inclusivity, we have empowerment, we have ethical behavior or ethical standards, all of them falling under the umbrella of all being process oriented. Um, Now, what well, we'll come back to what we mean by process oriented, but why do you think they emphasize the phrase process? Somebody who was here from the beginning. Or what do you understand, first off, by the concept of being process oriented? Jada, see what you think.
Well, when they say process, it makes me think of the definition you gave earlier that leadership is a relational process.
Hmm.
So, by being process oriented in, I guess, the, I don't want to use the word process again, but of leading others, as in, like, you're supposed
Take,
to,
take, take the idea of process oriented out of leadership and just think about it from everyday life. What do you understand from by that process? Jada, do you cook?
yes,
So what's your all-time favorite dish?
I, I guess egg salad. I don't really have one.
Okay, so if egg salad is your favorite dish, or one of them, um, what is the process that you utilize to make it? Or do you just do it any old how?
Well, I guess boil the eggs, after you cut it up, peel it, all that jazz.
Hmm.
Um, Continue.
Yes. What's your
Well,
process?
peel it, cut it up, you season it, you add your mayo and stuff like that.
All right. In your
Um,
process, do you allow the eggs to cool?
yeah, a bit, yes. I have
Hmm.
to.
Right, because you may not be able to handle it if
Too
it's too
hot.
hot. Right. Good. And the eggs, are they soft boiled or hard boiled?
Hard boil.
Hmm. So you're seeing what I'm getting at here. Everything has a process. If we want two things to happen, if we want the results we would like to get at the end, we follow the process. Secondly, we also want to make it a process so that it is repeatable in a number of times. Every time we do it, we should be able to get the same or similar results. That makes sense, Jada?
Yes, sir.
Right? Now, I know I kind of fall upon you there with about cooking, but if we apply that technique to everything around us, you would start to understand a couple of things. So, for example, I don't know if you've ever assessed the way in which you've um, made your friends around you. How do you go about making friends?
I don't think it applies here because they kind of just found me.
No? Right. So, Jada, do you have a significant other?
No, sir.
That might be why.
I don't reach out. They come to me, and then we end up conversing, and then eventually that becomes a friendship magically. It kind of just happens.
Nothing just happens, my dear. Um, if interestingly enough, with some people, the process of becoming friendly or the process of developing relationships is much easier than others. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? So my thinking here is to let you understand that when we're talking about the relational leadership model, we're talking about developing relationships with other people around us. So one of the first things I need you to do is to look at the process you utilize in relation to how you get to know other people when you first get in touch with them. All right, what do you do? How do you go about getting to know them and them getting to know you? And if you evaluate that process that you utilize, you might also recognize some of the things that might have led to past issues that you've had. So, I mean, who here is in some sort of significant relationship? Jada says or claims she doesn't. And
That would need
like
be so.
So, like,
Anthony,
what's a significant
you
relationship?
well, I think you're either married or you're in a long-term relationship with somebody. All right. So Ned, I see. So Ned is married. I take it.
Yes, sir.
All right. So have you had besides your wife, who you are married now? How many years?
2 years.
Oh, young relationship.
Young.
Okay. So this is hopefully your wife's not listening, so I don't put you on our spot. Was she the first person that you had a significant relationship with, or were there other people that you had significant relationships with before?
There were others.
Right. So have you ever really analyzed how you go about establishing significant relationships of that nature?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Is it a similar process that you utilize?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I don't want to dig too much, but can you tell us a little bit about the process? In general terms, we don't need to do specifics, but general terms.
General terms. Well, I try to become a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always try to be a friend to the person first, and
Right.
not just jump straight into relationship. And then as we start talking and getting to know about each other,
Mm-hmm.
then I would start to probably,
Pursue,
like, go ahead.
pursue is
Pursue, yes.
right.
Basically,
But
like,
what precursors the pursuant? What must
excuse?
happen before you start pursuing?
Oh, I have to develop that connection. And
Not
like,
only okay, right. So you're looking for aspects of the individual that meet your requirements, right? So
basically,
it's
yes.
almost like you have a checklist of things that that they
Yes,
have that fall into your category. And now I know some people are probably thinking I'm being really what's the word, clinical in this process, but the reality is that regardless of who we are, there are certain things we look for in people
that's true.
when we're developing relationships. There's certain traits that we look for. There's certain behaviors that indicate us somebody we might like to be with. Um, Along those lines, for those of you who may be willing to share, and this is really about sharing. Brandon, you have anything to share in this, or you are unattached and free and still sowing your wild oats. Brandon, Mr. Mohammed is ducking me. I can see. Miss Phipps, how about you? Come, Miss Lincoln.
Good day, sir.
Hi, Miss Lincoln.
So my relationship was a bit longer,
Right.
and at first, yes, we become friends, and as you get to know the person, and you find out about their interests and their beliefs, their values. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was a lot of similarities in upbringing, the core values that I was raised with. I
Right.
was able to identify some of those in my partner, things that I wanted to pass on to children and one day,
So
which I
let
have.
me clarify this. This individual you're talking about is somebody you're married to at this point,
Yes, I'm
and
married. Next year will be 10 years, but the
10 years.
relationship
Okay.
is 15
And how
years.
many children have you all had?
I have two kids.
Two kids in that productive relationship.
Yes.
But what started it all?
Well, we met and we chatted, and
So
from there,
it wasn't this just explosion of something taking place, right? Like we
no,
see
we
on the
knew each
movies all the
other
time.
and seeing each other, but it took a while for us to actually talk.
Develop a relationship. All right,
Yes,
I understand. And this was when? How old were you?
I was about 22, 23, somewhere there.
All right, and he was same age as you, or a
No,
little?
He is 5 years older than me.
No, it's not much. Still in the same almost pair groupings.
Mm.
All right, good. And so
Yeah.
you went through a similar process like Ned, got to know the
Yeah,
person, saw things you
yeah.
liked. All right. I see
But
Anthony's my uh-huh.
what attracted me to him was he's not a out there person. You know, it have people who just steal the attention when they enter space.
Uh-huh.
He was a quiet person and he would mingle and thing, but not loud and not show offy and this kind of way. And I
Oh.
like that.
Oh, so you were looking for a wallflower.
He basically because I am the social butterfly. Yeah.
Well, they do say that opposites attract, right?
Yes, and it is true with us. Yeah.
All right. So, Anthony, I noticed your microphone is open. So, is it that you were trying to contribute?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
okay.
am.
Uh-huh.
So, just take us back to the last class
Mm-hmm.
because I think one of the discussion was about I can't remember the individual name about marriage. She was in a marriage, and when her husband died, she saw some sort of freedom. Now we're talking about processes, I believe here, and
Right,
yes, we
correct.
need to go through the right process in order to make things work. Other than that, if you get through, it come like you was lucky. So I'm saying that to say, if you meet somebody and let's kick it off and they get married,
Mm,
when new things start to enter your life, I believe there the problem comes because you never really went through certain things like going out and seeing how this person is behaving in public,
right.
other things.
It didn't go through a
So
process.
yes, yes. So everything have a process. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just going to mention something like that. So it must
Right.
have a process in a
Yeah.
relationship too.
You ever heard the phrase marry in haste, regret at leisure?
I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. My aunt actually reminded me of a situation where she married somebody in haste. Um, they met and over a couple of weeks had a whirlwind romance, so to speak. Um, and this was back in the 70s. She got pregnant and they ended up getting married. Um, and then soon enough, they started to find out about each other in a lot more detail. And it turned out that she wasn't well liked by his family, and they got into a lot of conflict with each other, included apparently one of his brothers attacked him with a sword, to say the least. Now, this is the 70s in England, okay? She was one of the many people from Trinidad who migrated to the UK to study and to build a life. And of course, she came from a very sheltered environment and then moved to uh, the bright lights of the UK and had a lot more freedom than they were afforded when they were home in Trinidad. So obviously, things might have gone a bit awry. And of course, I think last week we spoke about the 70s being the beginning of that period where there was a lot of freedom of expression and the free love movement started up, and she kind of got caught up in things. And this is how she got involved with this gentleman. And in after the fact, the relationship fell apart because they were literally too different. There wasn't enough overlap for connectivity, and it created a lot of issues. Eventually, they got divorced. She still had the child, fortunately, and they shared custody of the child over time. And she got married a second time afterwards. But you know what? The problem was with in her process was she repeated the same error. And this is something that I wanted to find out from people. If you've ever looked at the relationships that you've had in your life to date and looked at those that went wrong, what you might not be doing is evaluating the process you're utilizing to select the individuals with whom you're engaging with. So much so that you might be overlooking your personal responsibility in the process of selecting these individuals or making those decisions, something that you want to do. Now, why are we talking about this? What is its relevance? Simply because the process of becoming a leader involves developing relationships. Obviously, not a relationship as critical as a romantic relationship, but one with possibly even more ramifications for your professional lives. This is critical because if you apply the same process orientation to all the relationships you have, both of a simplistic nature, your friends, and as well as those in terms of you begin to look at in a more romantic environment, and they're based upon this process orientation, then you might have greater success in your relationships moving forward. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, but that's a very clinical approach to things. Who would agree with that statement that I'm being a bit clinical in my approach to working out how I feel about somebody? Anybody thinks it sounds too scientific in nature? Nobody. Everybody's okay with that. Wow. So there are no romantics in class. No persons who think about love at first sight and getting your heart swept away, that type of stuff. Simon, what do you say? What you think about that?
Well, I mean, good way you're putting me on the spot here.
I remembered your voice.
Well, no, I mean, I'm sure it is possible, but I just don't know how often it happens nowadays. Like love, the whole idea of love at first sight, if that makes sense.
Hmm. But I mean, if we look at the movies and the books that we might have read growing up, a lot of
Yeah,
it hinges upon this star-crossed lovers who see each other and fall madly in love, and despite whatever thing going on around them, they fall in love and they have this forever after relationship.
yeah. I mean, I can't say for sure. Maybe it does happen, but I feel like it would just take more than a glance, two people glancing at each other.
And falling
Then,
madly in love. Yeah.
yes, correct. I think
Yeah.
it takes a little more than that. Sure, looks is one thing, but I mean, I
Yeah.
think personalities
Simon, are
and
you in a are you in a significant relationship?
no, I'm not.
Huh.
Is that my
Okay.
problem? I'm not enough in love at first sight.
No, it's because you probably haven't experienced some whole well. What age bracket do you put yourself in? Early
I'm
20s,
21.
right? Early 20s. So you're yet to probably experience falling hard for somebody. Let's put it that way.
Correct,
Because
yeah.
because regardless of the fact that you go through a process in
Hmm.
choosing somebody around you, when you do find somebody with whom you have this degree of compatibility,
Right.
and you begin that process of beginning to open up and commit to the individual, if that individual, for whatever reason, if you've not assessed them appropriately, or you've missed some aspects of it, or you've done something that affects that relationship negatively,
Hmm.
the the impact, the fallout of that is devastating for some people.
For sure.
Um, and if you've never experienced it, it might be something that you have to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah.
You have to break your heart a few times. It's sort of like you can't make a cake without breaking eggs. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about
Oh, I
in relation
understand.
to
Yeah.
that. Wow. Okay. All right. So Jada, would you agree with that? You and Simon seem to be in a very similar situation. Let's go.
Yes, love at first sight isn't something that I find. It sounds only good in fiction. I like romance movies and stuff, but
Right. Mm-hmm.
kind of grosses me out to think of it in reality. it's either infatuation that possibly grows into something more, or
Hmm.
you're just attracted to someone physically. That's how I see it. Because you
But
like,
have you ever experienced being infatuated with somebody and then they turn out to be a lot less than what your infatuation tells them?
um, not really in a romantic sense, but I felt something close to that before, yeah. And
Hmm.
they kind of, like, I really admired somebody, and then they turned out to be kind of awful to me and my friends. I was like, oh wow, people aren't always what they seem.
Correct. The fallacy that we see sometimes on television or in books that speak about love and this um, relationship development tends sometimes to be um, exactly that, a fairy tale. All right. Okay. So now, but people are. I hope people are understanding the reason why we're discussing relationships in that light, that romantic element. I know it might feel a little uncomfortable for some people to talk about it. Hi, Hernandez. Welcome aboard, Angelo. Um, so, the reason why we're talking about it is because at the very element of the relational leadership model, it is about relationships and how we go about developing the relationships and developing the nature of the relationship is process oriented. So the relational leadership model has those five elements that we talked about. So we could kind of skip forward and start to look at those elements in a little more detail. So the first element, if we go back here, is purpose. Purpose is one of sort of like the linchpin element because when we have a common purpose, it kind of binds us all together, and we can we can be really clear about it. Now, in organizations, if you join an organization, one of the first things that they ought to do with you is to introduce you to the organization's vision and mission. And that vision and mission should indicate to you what the purpose and function of the organization is going to be. From a personal perspective, you have your own vision and mission statements. Your vision is not something that might be written on a plaque and published as part of company documents, but most of you should have an idea of where you see yourself in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years in terms of short term planning. You have a vision in your mind of where you should be, what you should be doing, maybe even who you'll be with, that type of thinking. Any of you all have that? Personal visions and mission statements for yourselves? Just a show of hands, see if any of you all have that. How often have you ever come across that question? Right, so I see a couple of hands that went up. How often have you ever come across that question in a job interview? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, 10 years? Or many of you all have not yet done job interviews.
Yes, sir, I had that.
All right. So, Kamita, how did you respond to that question?
Well, just if I remember,
Mm,
I I honestly remember saying that. So they asked me what I wanted to achieve, what it is I was hoping to gain from the job and things.
all
And
right.
apart from learning about the organization and all of these things, and my goal was to be able to provide stability for my family.
Right.
That was my main purpose at that time.
Did you
So
get a
apart,
Did you
huh?
get the job?
Yes, and I'm still there now,
Mm-hmm.
and
No.
I've been able to move up in the time that I've been there.
Very
Yeah,
good.
so yeah,
And what do you think that told the interviewer and the company itself about your response?
I think it told them that I'm willing to be there for some time,
Right.
and that I
Commitment.
will, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not somebody that will just come work a few months and decide that hey they don't like it, because my first 2 years was really really tough, and I
As with
almost
most
gave
jobs,
up,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I had a reason for what I was doing, and being a parent does give you a lot of purpose.
I would understand that. Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was studying and wanted to contribute because at the time the husband alone was the
Mm-hmm.
one working. So I wanted to contribute. So I made this step and it paid off. Well, now I'm looking for better. So
Right.
if better comes, it's not that I'm ungrateful, but if a
Mm-hmm.
better opportunity comes, I'm moving on because as much as I came looking for something, I didn't
You
expect that that would be it for me.
right. So
Yeah,
you it's either the organization grows with you
yeah,
or you grow past the organization.
yes.
So it
Because with
means
everything that's happening in public service and in
correct.
ministries and all of these
Yes.
things now, if things reach like you reach a standstill and you're
Yeah,
not
you kind
sure
of
if this will
plateau in the
happen, yes,
yeah.
you hit that plateau and
Mm-hmm.
as I tell my manager, the only thing we certain about is the uncertainty. That is all we certain about.
The only thing I has to be certain
So,
about is the work is never done.
yeah, but over the years, you learn to balance, you learn how to manage, and there's core things that I learned that I'm very grateful for learning them because now I know how to separate it.
The two. Very good. All right, and I see one of your proteges requires your attention at the moment.
Yes, he's right here.
How old is he?
He'll be 2 in December.
Wow, okay, new family. And this is the eldest or the youngest?
No, I have a 13-year-old who's in Form 2.
Wow, that's a big gap.
Yes, it is.
Was
But I
that
want
planned
my
or was
son. Actually, it was planned earlier on, and after a while, I say, well, if it's for me, I will have it. And when God say it was time, I got my son.
all right?
So
Okay, I hear. You. So you have an older daughter, I take it then.
yes, I have a daughter. She's in SAGS in Form 2, and I have the baby at home.
Right. How much trouble is she giving you at this point?
Thankfully, she's no trouble.
Just yet.
Thankfully.
Well,
No,
the
and it's
whole.
going to, yeah, she's always been a very quiet child. She loves art. She draws, she sketches, she does digital art, she paints. So
All right.
that's how we, yeah. So no
Good, good,
trouble
good.
at all, and I hope to keep it that way for a
Well,
few more years.
yeah. Have the boys come in yet? Brandon has his hand up. He might be interested.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Yes, Brandon. I see your hand up. Thank you.
Um, any tips for for couples of a young baby? I have a young 4 month old baby girl, my first child. Any tips? Any?
Um, what exactly you need help with?
I want to say her, but anything to look forward to.
Oh, you have lots to look forward to. Four
Lots
months
of
is busy and
yeah,
reach nowhere as yet.
I
yeah.
know, I know, but I feel like ready for she to talk so she could tell me what's wrong with her sometimes.
Listen to me. You
Years will
all
pass
want them
before
to
that happens.
talk until they start to talk, and then you can't get them to stop. So
Oh
enjoy the
Lord,
silence.
Enjoy the
Because
silence.
then you
oh
hear daddy,
Lord,
daddy,
enjoy
daddy, daddy, daddy.
it.
Yes, that is true. It could be a bit
How
of
are
a
your
nag.
nights, Brandon?
Yes,
How are
hear
your
that?
nights, Brandon?
Thank you, thank you.
No, no, no,
I
no.
say, how
He's
are your
asking,
nights?
how are your nights?
Oh, my nights? Well, I work 8 to 4, and my wife is home on maternity leave. So she deals with the nights for now, but Sophie sleeps throughout the night. If she sleeps at about 10, she wakes up at 6 o'clock sharp every morning.
All right, you're lucky.
Yeah, so,
Well,
yeah, so
then
she
you're
gets some
not
sleep.
young.
You're very lucky.
You're
You're
Yeah,
very
very
once in a
lucky.
lucky.
while she might
Very
surprise me with
lucky.
at 2 o'clock, but she sleeps really good through the night. During the day, the mother does, yeah, she'll be up
Yeah.
all day with mommy.
All right. So you're not there. See, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Tomorrow's a holiday. Take over and give your wife a holiday. Okay.
Well, I actually took a day today to stay home, so I was home for the 4 days over the weekend as well to
All
help out.
right. Well, it's not help out. Take over.
Sorry, to
You.
take over. My
Yeah.
mistake to take over.
Your wife need to go on a holiday.
Well, she hearing everything right now, eh? So
Tell
she
your
right now, all
wife
three of us here in the room listening.
send her to a spa. Let her do a little manicure, pedicure, guilt
Yeah,
time.
she need to go on
Yeah,
a little day off, relaxing. The only
right. Taking
problem
notes.
is,
I taking notes.
yeah, no, no, you have to refresh your wife a lot because remember, while you're out at work and she's home alone with the child, or she may have other people with her, she's still the focal point of the child's needs and wants. Takes a toll on individuals. She needs a break, she needs to refresh, she needs to recharge. So, her having a day or a couple hours off, where she could relax and not be on a P's and Q's is an important element for her to recharge, which is where you come in, Brandon, to give her that assistance. Well, where
Yes,
generally it's sharing between partners.
yes, totally agree.
Right.
And thanks for all the advice and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it.
Well,
Well taken.
you could reach out to Miss Lincoln anytime if she's on the chat with you.
That's no
And
problem. I will certainly reach out to her.
there are
Just shoot
other
a message in the chat and I'll see what I can do. Don't
yeah.
worry. But
Thank
still,
There,
you.
I must say that I
mm-hmm,
must commend you for the advice that you just gave him because that is so true.
mm,
Parenting is hard, and especially with young children, you need all the help you can get. And sometimes we are so overwhelmed.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes we lash out and we're cranky, but it's not that you're annoying us really. It's just that we need a little minute to breathe
mm-hmm,
because sometimes you can't take a shower. So just
yeah.
give her 30 minutes so she can take a proper shower and then she'll be fine. Try it and you'll see.
Hmm. Those are things, yeah, that are very, very interesting. All right. So, importance of vision. So, in the relational leadership model, which again is process driven, vision is very critical. Now, you'd see the phrase down below at this slide here, vision driven and not position driven. Now, far too often in a lot of organizations, you'd have mission and vision statements of the organization, but the person sitting in the leadership position begins to change things around, and the organization becomes positionally driven, meaning that the person sitting at the helm is driving the goals and objectives of the organization. Now, that can be critical and can be dangerous simply because you have, yes, um, you have a situation that ends up happening that in the absence of that individual, what therefore are we are driving towards? So when you are vision driven, and the way in which we arrive at that vision is also going to be important, as opposed to positionally driven, where the person is responsible for the objectives of the organization. That is a lot weaker because without that person being there, the im- impetus to move towards that goal is no longer there. Whereas if it's a shared vision between the individuals who are working in the organization, then we begin to understand that that would last a lot longer than the positional situation. Now they're reminding us here that in the developmental process that we spoke about, individuals need to go through the process of knowing themselves before they can effectively work with others. The process calls for those engaged in it to be knowledgeable, the knowing part, and to be self aware of others, the being part, and then acting upon it. Now, this again is a process orientation, knowing, being, doing, which you all are going to be dealing with in the future. Now, the pattern of influence that we're trying to develop here is one that is circular in nature, meaning, and I spoke about this before, when you go through any process, the process needs to be circular in nature simply because we want to really spiral outwards with greater awareness. So this is why, in fact, the text talks about circular, but I would really think spiraling is better in the sense that every time you make a round, basically, you go around the merry-go-round, your awareness of self, your personal knowledge and information, and your ability to act should be improved. So it means that your perception should be growing, your knowledge base should be growing, and your competencies to and skills should be improving. So you should be spiraling outwards from some point of origin. Okay, so um, the knowing being doing is a phrase that Palmer actually puts together with head, heart, and practice. Head represents what we know, our intellect, the heart showing us what we believe, our vision and our behavior and so on. And of course, the doing part is the practice part. So this is another analogy that they utilize in terms of teaching. And interestingly enough, this actually proves to be true. Your intelligence and your passion is what drives for good practice in teaching. If you are lacking any of those three elements, you don't make a good lecturer. You might have all the heart and you're putting into practice, but you don't have the intellect to back it up. That's a problem. So that's like sort of teaching people things you actually don't know. But the one that tends to miss the most is the heart element. That wanting to achieve and wanting to be and inspire people. Those are the three things that are required. But they're all symbiotic. We need to have all of them in order to do it. Now, there's an element I want to get to here in terms of the development of the vision and mission statement. Now, so much so that there's an entire chapter set aside for vision and mission and its function and purpose and how it's dealt with. But it comes from the DAFT textbook. I think there's a group that's going to be dealing with that chapter um, here on the 21st of October, Vision and Strategic Direction. That's with Ramlakan, Andrews, and Mohan. Sorry. Speaking of Ramlakan, have you all been able to reach out to Amy? Has she responded to you guys?
Yes, seen the group already. Any
All
group
right.
chat.
All right. Good. 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 And Regis has the Michaela reached out to you guys? She's been here a few times.
Yes, sir. She was here last week in
Right.
class.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Just trying to find out. Okay. So um, when we are developing our skills in terms of presenting, of not presenting, in terms of becoming a leader, we want to make sure that we're included in this thing, our not only our skills and putting our skills into practice, but we are also putting in our heart into it, meaning that we are ensuring that what we are doing is something that matters not only to the organization, but it matters also to us as well. And you're not just doing it because. Um, Unfortunately, I've come across a lot of teachers who lack that passion because they've only gotten into teaching and they tell us, unfortunately, not only through their actions, but sometimes they just clearly state that I only here for the money. I don't really care about the teaching and the holidays. That was the other thing that a lot of I hear from a lot of teachers, and that's really horrible. All right. So leaders need to demonstrate a certain amount of competence and a certain amount of knowledge, which is important. Your credibility in terms of people believing you will be determined by people seeing that you know what you're talking about. Can't be a leader, especially in any organization, if you lack technical skills, and that's what this one is here. Your technical skills, but you also have some other skill levels that you need to have as a leader. Interpersonal skills, that really has to do with communication. These are the soft skills that create problems for most people who get to leadership positions but lack some of the softer skills. Sorry, leadership positions. They arrive in leadership positions because of their competence with a particular area of technology. So they come in with high technical skills, but they do not necessarily have the other managerial and leadership skills necessary to take them forward or to be a good leader. So these are some of the other skills that we have to go about training people on. The interpersonal skills, effective communication, how to go about effectively communicating with people is a critical skill that most people think they know what they're doing, but and oftentimes they're making critical errors in the way in which they're communicating. Conceptualization skills, which is the ability to really think creatively. Now, creative thinking is something that um, can be drummed out of you because if you think about it, right now, for those of you who have little children, when they start to draw and create things with them, play games with each other and stuff, they do so in in light of a great deal of creativity. There's nothing holding them back. There are no rules that they're aware of as you don't do this and you don't do that and you don't do next. A lot of people, however, as we get older, we begin to lose our creative thinking, which is really thinking outside the lines, simply because we're often taught, not often, we are taught, in, especially in our education system, to stop thinking creatively and think systemically. Meaning that if this is how we get things done, then we have to follow these rules. And there is a negative to that, there's a positive and negative to that in the sense that it kind of stifles your creativity because if you continually do things that are unpredictable, people will look at you as an unpredictable individual and they don't view you as being reliable. So there's a bit of our creativity that's sort of beaten out of us. But there are ways in which we can reignite those things. Technical expertise, those are fairly easy to get to. Those are the expertise required for your position, as your qualifications, and so on. The next tricky one is the tactical skills of negotiation, human relations, and other skills necessary to achieve the objectives. Now, those skills are also tricky. So, of all the four different skills here, three of the skills don't necessarily come in your. Hey, speak of a devil. Welcome, Miss Mohammed. We were just talking about you earlier. Um, in a good way, of course. All right. So, the knowing element that we spoke about involves these sets of skills that we need to know. So, if you're going into a leadership position, check yourself in relation to these types of skill development. Do you have all of the information necessary? Um, Not that you would have everything all at once, but do you think you have some of the things that are required for this job that you're going into, this position that you're going to? So, again, this simply means that it's an ongoing process for you to learn and develop your skills in these areas across the board. All right, the being we talked about already has to do with your value structures, who you are as a person, what you determine as being right and wrong, and that is something that is sort of inbred into you, and you begin to show those things by your behavior, things that you do and things that you say will expose those things to us. Is it the right fit? So we talked about that in terms of relationship building in a romantic sense. And when people behave in a particular manner, it begins to say something about who they are and how they think about things, um, how they value things around them, other people, and their what is important to them. Is you begin to get a good idea of who they are and how they would behave with you. And this is something that is important when you're choosing a mate in life or a partner in life. But it's also critical in terms of us as a leader. Moving into leadership positions this, means that we need to be exhibiting the correct set of value structures that will signal to other people that you're a person of character that we are willing to follow. All right. And of course, the doing part is actually doing what we say, acting on what we're talking about and putting things into plan and actually doing the work necessary to create the change that we want, which is basically, really just putting everything in practice. And that's the element that we talk about here. All right. Now, here we talk about a phenomenon knowing. So we talked about the need for us to do things. The opposite is also true. We have people in positions of leadership who fail to act. And the reason why they don't do anything is because they are fixated on perfection, meaning that they're not going to risk acting on or putting something into action because not everything that they would like to have in place is in place. And this failure to act is 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 stifling for organizations, if not for individuals as well. Because I've worked in situations like this before, where um, the people weren't willing to try anything because they perceive as if we're not ready yet, we're not ready yet. So if we're not never going to ready, we're never going to take a chance to get things done. That then leads to stagnation in the organization, and people feel as if, well, we're not doing anything, we're not going anywhere, and that shakes the relationship that you develop with other people because they then look upon you as well. Um, we're not going to be getting anything done here. Also, it speaks to the fact that I don't want to take a risk, so that as a leader that I am sending out that signal. So that means if somebody else tries to do something and they make a mistake, then I'll be chastised for it or even punished for it. And that actually is a negative type of attitude to having your organization run, or to have even let's say in your family. How many of you can do something? Let's say Jada and I spoke about her and her egg salad, and the question would be: is Jada, did every time that you try to make an egg salad, did it come out perfect, or were there times where it was less than perfect? Jada, or
Yeah.
and yeah, were there times, especially when you first started making your egg salads, that it didn't come out, the way you'd like?
Not really. Some of it coming back. It usually tastes pretty good and generally same all around. Well, as
Show
close as
off.
possible. Yeah.
What, do you cook anything else?
Yeah, but I don't follow recipes or have anything. I
That's
still
fine.
can
I,
cook.
I'm not saying, but you have a process that you use, right?
Well, yeah, I kind of
Right,
just
right. So let's go back. In taking a process, it means have you in the fact that you, especially as you said, you don't follow recipes. So you try a thing, you put this here, you put this there. Have you ever done things in the past that people say, "Ah, I didn't quite like this," or they're just being, safe with you?
yeah, my I let my friend try something that I made and she gave it a 6 out of 10.
Why?
I asked her because I wasn't sure, and she was like, "Oh, you usually cook really good, but this is not bad, but it's not very good. It's a 6 out of 10."
Right, but did they give you a reason as to why? Because food is very subjective. Huh?
I don't remember.
You
It's
don't
been a
remember?
few years. I
It's
just
been a
remember
while.
the feeling. Yeah.
Okay. Did it affect you for a long time?
No, I didn't mind. It didn't taste amazing, so I kind of get it. My friends are usually honest with me.
All right, that's good. Have you ever tried poached eggs?
Uh, yeah, I can't do that.
Why not?
I don't know. It just never came out right.
Do you know they sell little containers for poached eggs now?
No, I didn't know that.
Yes, they do.
Oh,
Because
okay.
if you don't get that drop in the water, you know, it'll can make a mess and it'll pop. Um, but there are little containers you can use now to actually assist you with that. I think they have them in silicone. I have a set that I use that sits on top the water, um, made of steel actually.
Huh.
Yeah,
Well, I
try it
don't
and
really
see
eat them
because
because I
put
failed before.
sorry.
No, I said I don't really eat them because I failed before, so I didn't know that these things existed.
Right. No, well, again, and this is what I'm talking about. If you set up the standard of zero defects, zero mistakes, then you're telling everybody else you don't tolerate that. So that means you're not going to allow for experimentation. You follow me? Now, right now, Jada, you're by yourself. You're cooking ready primarily for yourself and maybe your immediate family. But if you take that attitude outside, um, and you don't do something because you don't know or you're not ready to take a chance, then you're limiting yourself in terms of the other opportunities and things that you can learn from taking a chance. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
You're young. You're young yet, so I mean, things to understand from there, right, Jada?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Okay, so that's something as a leader you want to not do. You don't want to be fixated on having things done perfectly. All right, and therefore, in doing things, you have to learn. You have to take time to learn through making mistakes sometimes. In fact, the best way to learn something is by trying it and making your adjustments after the fact. Now, that's part of what we refer to as experiential learning, or learning from the experiences. So, how can you promote the learning way as a leader? One, through your own practice, through your own learning, helping others to learn. Become a mentor to people in your organization to help them be able to learn through the experiences by either you becoming the mentor or the teacher in that organization tutoring. And the third thing is by shaping an environment that your organization promotes learning in the job. All right. And accepts. And so if you have a learning environment or learning organization, we are all going to experiment together and learn things together. All right. Yeah. And the way you could do that is by bringing in experts to, teach us different aspects of the organizational um, planning or whatever skill or technology that you're bringing in together. That promotion of learning collectively is also a very strong team building type exercise again, and it's good to work within an organization and see the people who are your leadership sitting alongside you, who might be in a more subordinate position, learning together. That's actually a very empowering feeling for people, and we'll talk about empowerment later on as we go on. So we're still on the concept that relational leadership is purposeful, and creating that purpose is going to be one that has to be shared as well. If so, the simple thing is, if you have a dream and you find a partner in life and you tell them that this is your dream and this is what we're going to do, how committed would they be to that dream? How do you think? Like Brandon, you have a relatively new marriage, right? You have a dream for where you want to take yourself and your family, correct, Brandon?
Yeah,
Uh huh.
correct.
So, is this dream yours, or is this dream a dream that you have, a goal that you have that is shared between yourself and your wife?
It's a goal between myself and my wife, yeah. It's a family dream, yeah.
Right? And how did you arrive at that?
Um, sorry, Sophie, quiet.
No, 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 don't quiet Sophie. She's part of the discussion as well.
um, I guess as hold on. So I guess as we, because at first it was just me and my wife at first, and then eventually became, well, Sophie came along with us, and it was a planned pregnancy, of course.
Hmm.
But based on how I grew up and how my wife grew up, there's certain things that I want for myself and for her, and just for us to reach a place where
Right,
we are
Brandon.
comfortable financially.
I have to ask you some tricky questions here. Have
Sure.
you have you articulated this with your wife, or are you
Yeah.
just telling me this? Have you written it
No,
down?
no, no. Yeah, we have a plan together of where we want to be next 5 years, 10 years going forward.
Right.
You know.
Okay. And
Um,
and these are dreams that you all sat down and discussed and trashed out, right?
Many times we always sit down and just think about how
Argued
we want things to be. Yeah.
argued each other. basically.
Not argue. We have
Discuss.
plans, you know. I
You
guess,
discuss
and then
things.
within these plans, I mean, she have her own personal goals, just like me have. I have my own personal goals, but we have to achieve as well, or want to achieve as well within these
Hmm.
plans, you know,
Yeah. So you
career
have
wise and these things.
right. So you have individual plans, but in a collective environment.
Yeah,
All right. Cool. All right. So hey again, a call in the background there. Now,
yeah.
the point
I'll
I'm
be
trying to
back.
make here is that if we develop plans and goals that we develop from a position of shared interaction, then we're likely to get a high level of compliance and a higher level of commitment to working towards that organizational goal. Now, I'm taking the example that Brandon gave us. This is from a very personal standpoint of the goals and objectives that they have for their lives. All right, it's one, and he's making the point that it was both himself and his wife sharing their own individual dreams, meshing those dreams together, and coming up with a commonality that they can work towards both for individual development as well as collective development for themselves. Think about as a leader, if you've come into an organization and you're setting up vision and mission statements for the organization and you don't consult the other individuals in your organization, the people that are there, that is a very negative type of activity that takes place in some organizations. In new organizations in particular, what the objective should be is to try to work towards what is referred to as socialized visions. Socialized visions are those visions that are developed by amalgamating and bringing together everybody's group idea of what the future should look like for the organization. A personalized vision, on the other hand, is one where the leader dictates the position that they see for the organization, regardless of where anybody else sits or any other input from anybody around them. This is what they see. Now, um, oftentimes I get the impression that a lot of effective entrepreneurs outside there have a very personalized vision to the way in which they run their organizations. Elon Musk comes to mind where he has a particular set of objectives he would like to accomplish. Um, and those personalized visions have significant impact on the world around them. And that vision then is sort of like socialized after the fact, but it seems to come from something he wants to do with his companies in terms of the electric car, SpaceX, and that type of stuff. But the easier one to sell, of course, is socialized vision, because socialized vision means that we are getting everybody together and we are willingly working together for the achievement of a particular goal or objectives of the organization. This is important, and it's a process that organizations ought to go through from time and time again to be able to ensure that the vision and mission statement that you see on a company's wall or in their booklets or their publications is something that is shared by an organization. Now, if you are fortunate to be at the beginning of an organization where the vision and mission statement is yet to be determined, then you're in a really nice place. But if you are joining an organization after the fact, you need to appreciate, both as the leader who might be coming in later in the organization's life cycle, or as a subordinate coming in, you need to pay attention to where they are in terms of what their vision and mission statements are. Now, for most of you, you might join an organization where there are vision and mission statements. So I'm looking for anybody with examples of having joined an organization. How did the organization bring about your knowledge of their vision and mission statements? Anybody here who's willing to share in that particular aspect? Anybody? Especially somebody who's working in a government type organization.
So for
Nobody.
my company, we have a handbook.
Right.
We have a handbook in my company, so the vision and mission statement is there in the handbook. And
Right.
also upon your successful completion of orientation and stuff like that,
Right.
yeah,
So yep. Okay. Good.
agree to the information. Yeah,
Right. What this is a private company or a public company?
yeah, there's a private company.
Right. So they have an initiation and an induction activities they go through with all new employees, right? And bring you
Yeah, yeah.
kind of bring you abreast. Now that's important. Why is it important? It's important for exactly that, to get you on board, to understand this is the vision and mission statement of the organization, and this is your place in it, and this is what we would like you to do. So think about a new CEO coming to the organization. Their induction has to be even more intense. How long did that induction take for you?
Well, initially 2 weeks.
Oh, that's a fairly good time. Yeah, that's about the right amount of time for that, I think. Especially if it's a large organization. Um, Anybody who works in a government-oriented organization and took up a job, and tell us what the experience was like taking up a job with that organization. Anybody? Public sector.
Excuse.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I work in a government organization.
Right.
Yeah, so it still is my first public sector job.
Right.
I've always worked in private sector, so it was an adjustment. So apart from getting to know the goals and the mission and the vision, it was trying to align myself with all the new processes and procedures and all of these things. But
Mm-hmm.
also learning that how our unit in particular was aligning its um,
Activities.
policies.
Mm-hmm. All
Yeah,
right.
aligning the policies and how we do things to work in cohesion to achieve the goals.
Right.
So along the way, we would have had to adjust, amend,
Right.
Then with the new board coming on, we had new board of directors come on a
Right.
little while ago. So certain things change, and
Oh,
things still changing. So it's a constant adapting going on, modification, new policies being introduced, and
right.
that kind of thing. So
But is the basic vision of the organization changing?
no, the vision it hasn't changed.
But
It's
when you
just
first arrived, were
uh-huh.
you did you go through an induction exercise?
Not really. Not really. It wasn't a long, like how the guy said, 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had a little orientation, a little walkthrough, tour to the departments, get to know your way about and what they do and that kind of thing. But after that, it was just dive straight into my unit
Work.
with the
All right.
records.
Were you in a senior position that you came into?
No, no, I started as a clerk.
All right. And it meant that you had to kind of learn along the way.
Yes, yes,
All
I
right.
learned along the way because there was no formal training or anything like that. I
Or
learned as I
induction. And
no,
you'd notice that that is a weakness.
yeah,
It is something that needs to be addressed in the public sector, that when new employees come on,
yeah,
um,
because our newest team member, she's there just shy of a year,
mhm,
and I share everything I've learned with her because I remember how difficult it was for me in my first year because without any formal training and people not willing to share and this kind of thing, you kind of learn as you go and figure it out.
right, and that leads to lots of complications along the way, or could.
Yeah, but I make it and I'm still making it. So I guess once you determine, you could do anything.
True, But what the
Mhm.
point being though is that that ought not to be the case.
Yes, things should have been put in place
Right.
so that it could have a smooth transition for
Smooth.
new staff.
Correct.
And
And
yeah,
that,
we have had little training sessions in between, which was
but,
put forward by the training unit in HR.
hmm
But that was just general to the corporation, not
right.
specific to my unit.
And it's not consistent.
No.
Right. So
Yeah.
again, as I said before, the for private sector organization, motivating staff to move towards achieving their goals and objectives is critical to their survival. In the public sector, it's not necessary because the culture will unfortunately teach you
Yes. That
what
is
is required of you,
yes.
and that's really a poor approach. This is one of the things that they talk about when they speak about public sector reform. These are the kind of things that they're talking about that should be addressed. You follow?
Yes, I know. And what they mainstreaming right now is the performance based assessment.
Management and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
but perform.
the KPIs and the
Ooh,
everything
yeah, yeah,
everything is metrics. So
yeah.
they're not placing enough emphasis, in my opinion, on the humans. You
Right,
know?
but you the first part of the problem is always going to be that you have these metrics that you're putting in place, but in the first instance, were the job descriptions clearly identified? Anyway, that's a
Yeah,
different
the job
argument.
descriptions will identify, and then there's the fine print that says you're also required to
Do anything else that the
complete,
person says.
yeah, anything related to, you know?
Yeah, accomplishing the
Yeah.
goals of your supervisor.
Yes. So,
That's
but
a trick, but just to let you
yes,
know.
it is. It is. But I've learned a lot as since I'm there, so I manage.
Yeah, I know.
You
We
have to
all
find.
we all we all learn to manage in the system,
Yes.
all
Yes.
right? Okay, but we understand now why it's so
But
important for us
still,
to
I
actually.
just as we on the topic of public, I just wanted to share this with everyone.
Uh huh.
I have worked with the corporation 5 years, right? Going on 6 years.
Uh huh.
And I recently applied for personal loan. So, I would have had to get the job letter and whatnot
Correct.
saying,
Yes.
right, I have my pay slip showing whatever. Everything went through. I went to the bank, everything. And when they did their calls now, they would call to confirm with the HR or whatever.
Correct.
I received a call that they weren't able to go through with the loan because I didn't, HR told them that I don't have any contract. So when I went to HR and I spoke to the manager because my contracts are 2 years
Uh huh.
running consecutively. So this is my third contract
Right.
period. This is the third contract period. When I went to the HR management, they said that we not issuing no contract at this time. So it was a real hard thing for me to swallow because I invested all this time. And so I felt like you're trying to control me, not just in the workspace, but in other aspects of my life. You're trying to keep me in a certain bracket. It was
Yep.
difficult. It was
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to accept. And, well, I'm in the
Well,
process of applying all over. So good
yeah,
things will happen.
yeah. Well, that has actually one of the reasons why the unions have been arguing against contract labor because of the instability of tenure, which is one of the requirements that the bank asks before they approve loans. They want to make sure that you'll have an income assured coming in the future so that they can get their payments, so to speak.
Yes, so that's true.
Mm,
And then the sad thing is that even if you change jobs, you have to start all over again.
yeah, because you'd have to start your
Yeah, you
all
have
right,
to
but
start all over.
yeah, because you had to build up some sort of
But even though the unions are fighting, what they're doing, management is finding loopholes.
well, yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
reason for that because on the other side, what's happening as well is that a lot of public sector workers are not pulling their weight, so to speak, and as a result, in order to circumnavigate the issue of discipline, because you can't easily discipline a public sector worker
Yes,
who's
especially
permanently
the
appointed.
permanent ones. Yes,
Yeah,
there's a lot of problem areas with the permanent ones.
yeah.
So that is why they everyone now has to be on contract. They have no permanent staff for public service.
Well, and
When
and
the
that also
current,
means that the bank has to make some adjustments as well in terms of its own policies.
yeah, they should look into that.
Yeah, it's quite true. All right, so we're back on the relational leadership and its purpose. So we talked about the function of a vision statement, the function of mission statements is to not only get us to understand what the organization is, but also to inspire us to want to work towards that. So when you have a good organization with powerful leaders, the vision that they exhibit will be one that encourages us to want to work, to want to get out of bed and come to work and be part of achieving these goals, because you see those things as something beneficial not only to yourself and the organization but beneficial to the world around us, to the lives of people beyond the your everyday walk of life, so to speak. um, your vision is noble, and that's the kind of thing that helps people to want to work or feel that they want to give up jobs that might not necessarily be as, what's the word I want to use, profitable, and give up those positions of profitability to work on something that they feel is of importance to the society and an importance to the environment that they work in. This is something that we're talking about here, working towards positive change. So this is one of the things that I find a lot of teachers or a lot of people who work in organizations that are oriented towards bettering society, but they're treated probably the worst in terms of remuneration packages and so on. But they're still there. They still try hard to make sure that they do the best that they can do, despite the circumstances under which they're working. It's because they're bought into a vision that sees their work as being important beyond themselves. That what we're doing is improving the condition of the world around us, and we are not hurting people but helping them. And what is, I mean, if you work in a job where you feel that what you do is of critical importance to the world around you, and we are assisting and helping people, then it's going to bring a sense of of satisfaction to your life, because it's going to be that, what I did was worthwhile. I helped to improve the life of people around me, of the world around me, the environment around me, and those kind of things, go beyond a paycheck, so to speak. Um, so I mean, that's the kind of thing that we'd like to, as a leader, pull people towards, and get them working towards doing those kind of things. So I need to come off the area of well, change. We should stay on change for one more thing, and that is the difficulty involved with change. So for anybody working in the public sector right now, the subtle changes taking place in the organizational structure, in terms of the disappearance of these permanent worker positions, and the emergence of contract workers, as Kamita was talking about, is a form of change that's taking place in the public sector that a lot of people don't like, simply because it makes um, the your what's the word I want to use, your it makes your position very indeterminate, and there's no sense of permanency, which is something that used to exist in the public sector. Interestingly enough, as with most things we can see, there's no real consistency in that statement. There's no permanency in anything. So the change that we're talking about that is being brought about in a lot of organizations create problems because the situation is driving us towards making some change. The change ought to be for the betterment of the organization and for the society that is taking place. Now, change theory tells us the process of change is one that requires us to break what exists now, make the change, and then set everything back. And causing change or creating change requires a form of triggering. So if we think about the movement, the wholesale movement of Costa to online classes, the triggering event was the emergence of the pandemic, and the that triggered everything, and we had to make the full swap over to the online environment within the space of 2 to 3 months, to be able to deal with the fallout that took place in relation to that. So that was the trigger event. The situation, though, is that should we freeze the classes back? No, the ongoing technology says no. What we should be doing is rather than freezing ourselves into a new situation, we should stay in a kind of slushy situation where we can make adjustments back and forth from the online to the real world easily, flexible. So rather than go back into a state of refrozen circumstance, we should be in a more flexible situation. That helps us to not have to go through the painful transition of change again. Now, the problem with that is that as humans, we prefer some form of stability to our lives. We like things to stay the same because we feel comfort levels. And when those comfort levels are challenged, it creates that challenge for change. So as a leader, one of the things that you're going to get involved with is engaging in exercises of change, and you would see that change is going to be a challenge that either side, either as the leader or as subordinates in organization, creates a pretty tricky issue for us across the board. All right. Have any of you all, well, Kamita has talked a lot about the kind of change she's experienced having moved. Has anybody worked in organizations or or currently working in a situation where there's some level of change taking place? Or you've like Brandon engaging in change in personal from a personal perspective. Regis, I saw your hand up.
Well, sir, I currently work for a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and before the pandemic, we used to go in person to file all documents and stuff
Right.
like that. But
Right.
now the judiciary made the change for us to upload online.
Right.
So a lot of it was difficult for some of the other lawyers that wasn't technologically, well, didn't really get computers and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So that was a major change for the lawyer I work for.
Right. Okay. And how did he manage it with you?
Well, most of it I had to show her how to go about uploading the documents, because the way how it had to be scanned for the judiciary to be able to stamp it to state that they got the filing documents.
Right.
And then even after that, once the judiciary opened back, they wanted us to bring the original documents into them for them to
After the
have the
fact.
original copies.
Right. So they want a hard copy
And they
redundancy.
had the soft copy also, yeah.
Right. So yeah, it makes sense because legal documents you wanna have hard copy redundancies in the event that something goes wrong with the what do you call it, the database. and they lose anything, they would have a hard copy redundancy. Because remember, when you're dealing with legal matters, you might be dealing with life and death circumstance, right? Regis?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a legal, a paralegal. You're working
Legal
as a
clerk,
paralegal.
yes.
Yeah, a paralegal. All right. Makes sense. Anthony, I see your hand up.
Yes, sir.
Uh huh.
Well, I work at the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service.
Right.
Okay,
Wow. Okay.
so I just gonna give you a little understanding how our promotion used to be.
Right.
Before
Okay.
it used to be by seniority, so everybody was given a number when they came in,
Mm-hmm.
and you would have been promoted according to when your number comes. However, in the last couple of years, they have moved from seniority to what you call a merit.
Right.
Okay, so they came up with a way of you gaining points and you'll be promoted based on this. A big part of this was points allocated for
Various forms of
education.
training. Yeah.
Like if you have a degree, or if you
Mm-hmm.
have a master's, or if you have a certificate in certain courses.
Right.
Now, of the past, these senior firefighters would not have engaged any sort of degree or
Studies.
studies.
Yeah.
So, how they bring about the merit now, these senior officers who believe they would have been promoted by number
Uh huh.
no longer would be the ones that would be promoted soon, because the people that came into the fire service recently would have come in with degrees and batch and masters and all sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, they have it. So
Yeah. We have
these
a.
um these senior firefighters now obviously believe that they were unfairly treated in the new system, or they would be unfairly treated, and they have already placed some thoughts in their mind that they are going to give some trouble. Okay,
In,
because
trouble in
they are
what way?
seeing young officers coming into the job and going to be promoted after they would have been in the job for maybe about 15 years, because it's about 15 years they have not made a promotion into that certain ranks.
Mm.
So to me, it's unfair to them, obviously, because they would have gained their level of competence and ready to move on to the next rank. And
Mm.
here you are, the service is telling you now that these younger people who would have come in with a degree would be mostly, most likely promoted in front of you. So
Yeah,
it
but my question I want to ask is, has
mhm,
the service evaluated the functionality of those degrees in relation to the
right,
subject matter that
right.
you're dealing with? And I mean, how can a
So
degree in management and business assist
right.
you in a firefight?
Very good question, sir. Very good question.
Because
And
for
I
me,
don't
meritocracy in relevance or relevant qualification is going to be more critical. I can understand where you're talking about people being qualified, but if those qualifications aren't aligned with the organization's goals and objectives, then that doesn't serve the betterment of the organization.
right, and that is where the whole issue comes
I
about.
think your services department, um, the seniors, I should say, have a valid point, especially if they really haven't, if the service hasn't really worked out properly how they're differentiating between the years of experience and the experiential learning, because they should also be evaluating experiential learning as well to qualifications achieved outside of the organization, especially those qualifications not related to the firefighting services.
And you are quite correct. And that's the issue a lot of people have, because some of
Hmm.
these degrees really don't really align with, like, let me say if you had safety or something that will align yourself with
Right, those
the
would make
fire
sense.
service, well, people would have understood that a little better. But some things like people do in a degree in let's say I'm gonna cut something and try, let me say like art or craft or something like that, and you're giving someone points for something like that when I would have developed my level of competency over the last 15 years. So some
Yep.
people really argue the fact that
Mm,
they don't
right.
deserve the points. And
Well,
it's like that right now. So
I
right
think
now it's
yeah, I think they need to look back at that policy. I mean, my personal position is that they need to look at the difference between specific types of training that are relevant to the job site or to the job descriptions, as opposed to general education. Because general education simply means that are outside of the skill sets that you're looking for. Simply mean that the person is more trainable. That's the only thing that the degree says. Just letting you know. You can finish a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD. All it says is that you know how to go about and do research, you know how to present papers, and you know how to, in some instances, especially with some of the foreign MBAs, you know how to pass an exam. Um, but when you start to get to PhD levels and stuff like that, you know how to go about conducting academic research. Does it translate into training in first aid, saving lives, how to fight a fire, how to
exactly.
position the equipment? Those, I think, are more relevant to the fire services. That would make it would earn you much more points and seniority because you're dealing specifically with the goals and objectives of the organization. So I think what's happening, because it's not only your organization, the fire services, that suffers from that as well. I think the police
Yeah.
and the prisons also have this thing, is
Everybody
because they're trying to use one particular model to make this change, but they haven't thought out the implications of these wholesale changes that they're making in terms of moving away from seniority to meritocracy. That's the transition that's taking place. They haven't worked out the logistics of it and don't understand the concept of okay, some qualifications are weighted heavier than others in terms of its application to the services that you're dealing with. Consider, for example, a police officer who goes on to do a legal degree. That makes a lot more sense than a police officer that does a degree in management studies. All right, because I mean, how much management studies they're going to use in the police service? You follow? As opposed to the legal person who can then become a special prosecutor on behalf of the government to go to court and present cases and stuff like that. Those are the things that they have to start to measure and be more type specific in terms of what. So change has to be positive across the board and must suit the needs that we're talking about. It just can't be arbitrary change or change for change's sake. That's the situation that we start to look at. Um, and it's one of the challenges that we're going to be facing across the board. Now, what may have led to that type of change, the triggering event that is taking place in the public sector, is that there are insufficient numbers of individuals entering the service with appropriate qualifications to promote into leadership positions. And that is part of the problem that they're facing in terms of doing that. All right, so I think we can move out of this area and go into the inclusive issue here. Now, again, process oriented in terms of being inclusive in nature. When we talk about the relational leadership promoting inclusivity, inclusiveness means understanding, valuing, and actively engaging diversity in views, approaches, styles, aspects of individualities, such as gender, sexual orientation, or culture, that add multiple perspectives to a group's activity. So let's understand what inclusiveness means. This is by far probably one of the most challenging things that a lot of cultures face. Now, again, we have to remember that this model is being developed in the United States in the out of the 80s and so on, but applied in their current circumstances, this is a critical element because of the amount of difficulties they're having with diversity. And diversity is not only measured in terms of racial or ethnic diversity, but also in such aspects of gender and sexual orientation and gender definition. Because, I mean, we have some developments in terms of how people identify. Um, some of it I understand, some of it I don't quite get in terms of what their pronouns are. I saw there was a guy in the States, not the States, in Ireland that went to jail because they refused to identify or recognize the pronouns of an individual um, that a child prefers to be identified with. You all saw anything in relation to that? When they were looking at the relative fairness of something along those lines? But well, besides the story itself, do you all understand the issue that the model is trying to deal with?
Yes, sir, we do.
Yeah. Now we have, let us look at our circumstance here. Where are the issues with inclusivity here in Trinidad and Tobago? And possibly we could extend this to include Ned, who could tell us if there are exclusion or inclusive issues with Ned, if Ned is still here, and Harry.
So in China, we now scratching the surface of inclusivity.
What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
We are now beginning a process to actually include different races and cultures and attributes of people's persons.
Hmm. You sure about that? How old are you?
35.
Hmm. And how long have we been independent?
63 years.
Hmm. You think we've been suffering from this? What do you think the 1970s Black Power movement was about in Trinidad?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not something that we're now dealing with. It's something that we've been treating with for a long time. But where are we in terms of what has happened? When we talk about being inclusive and engaging diversities here, we have, and we're going to be very blunt here, we have a big division between people of Asian or Indian ethnic origin and people of African origin. Yes?
That is true.
Yeah. Well, Ned is seeing it, and and Ned is not from Trinidad, right? Would you all agree with my analysis? Kennedy, I saw your mic pop open there for a minute.
I was going to say in what ways, because it have some ways that
Well,
we have
especially
plasma.
correct. In the way in which it happens is generally, especially when we come around to politics and the
That I will
select
agree.
and the selection of leaders when we and who you support. Yes, Kennedy.
I'm listening, sir. I'm
No,
listening.
okay. So the terminology that's utilized by the political scientists is tribal thinking, and we have a tendency that if you're Indian, you support Indian parties, and if you're African, you support African parties, or distinctly PNM and UNC as it exists now. So, in essence, we have a what's the word I want to use? We have a two-party state, and it really is of the last set of elections that we've had is really a shifting between one grouping to another. Does anything really change when one group is in power as opposed to another grouping?
Not really. Nothing to really change.
Right. So why should we determine our leadership based upon our forefathers' origins? Why are we not identifying as Trinidadians, and we are thinking of ourselves as Indo-Trini and Afro-Trini,
Good
and
points.
and not just Trini? Understand? understanding it. Fortunately for us, the grouping of individuals referred to in the population analysis as mixed, or what is the colloquial term we utilize for people who mixed?
Douglas.
Douglas.
Right. hmm Fortunately for us, I think that population is growing. So pretty soon we wouldn't be clear. We clearly won't be one or the other. But interestingly enough, the more in more rural areas of Trinidad and Tobago, the more distinctive those divisions are kept, because the society that exists there becomes less flexible. And this is true because there's a lot of what we refer to as you don't get that type of mixing taking place in terms of common ground. And this is also featured as well in the religion as well. So you'd find that a lot of Indians stay within their mosques and churches. Well, not even mosques as much anymore because mosques have become more of a mixing ground. But especially in terms of the Hindu temples, Hindus have a tendency to start to think of this purity of race. In fact, you actually hear the pundits talking about it very openly about, keeping Indians, and then there are a whole host of radio stations that purport this separateness. Do you all ever hear about these things, or see this being engaged with around you? All right. So, guys, as yes, Anthony.
I think that I agree with you partially because I think that in the mosque and in churches, you have a bigger mixture of
Correct.
different
Races.
races now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like the temple, you will still see a wide, well,
A
you would see more
predominance.
East Indian,
Yeah.
in
A
East
predominance of
Indian
East
than
Indian.
here.
Correct. Yes.
So I think that it is changing. It is changing. Maybe not
But it's
fast
slow.
enough throughout the
It's.
country.
Mm-hmm.
However, when those things change, it will be a better place for all of us.
True that.
Okay, the politics will change,
Hopefully.
the way of thinking, people values.
Right.
It will be different.
So, as a leader in the future, moving forward, what when we start to speak about being inclusive, this is one of the first things that you're probably going to have to engage with, engaging in diversities, specifically of religion and specifically of race. Then we have to open it up to diversity of gender, sexual orientation, and gender identification. That's another element that is going to bring to bear on us because um, we already have challenges simply with ethnic backgrounds. When we start to treat with sexual orientation, it starts to make things even worse because no, this is where Ned could probably get in because maybe Ned, have you been familiar with the Trinidadian setup? Because you said you had been in school down here as well.
Yes, sir. I spent 2 years.
All right. Did you experience any of that kind of ethnic divide?
I saw it,
Right. Okay.
especially in the political part of it. You
It,
know.
it, 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 it finds itself in the political sphere simply because it's a matter of control.
Yeah.
Um, and it means that um, whichever party can manipulate their group to come out and vote, they have the best chance of probably taking up leadership positions. So it's a struggle for them to survive. Did you come across any of the gender and sexual orientation issues, both within your own country as well as here in Trinidad? And if Arlene is here, she could probably, Aisha, sorry, could contribute from the position of where she's from. So
Well, for Grenada, I'm not seeing in terms of the gender issue. No, I cannot say that I'm seeing that.
It's not as
They,
prevalent.
it's not as prevalent.
Hmm.
And well, the sexual orientation part of it, it's just starting. It's not a, how should I put it? That whole aspect is just starting to,
Emerge.
pop up here, emerge here. So
Mm.
we are not seeing any. I would tell you plain out the problem that we have here in Grenada in terms of inclusiveness and exclusive is same the politics, and it has to do with the two major political groups,
Right.
and it's just that the country is split in terms
According
of
to,
that. It
and
it even split churches when election comes close.
wow, and
Yeah,
that
but
has it is not even ethnic. There's no ethnic division or
no, there is no
differences,
ethnic division, no gender division. It's just politics.
and that could be more than dangerous, huh?
Yes,
Even because you can't even see a difference between individuals, but just because of who they associate with creates this big problem. Wow.
yes.
Are you sure is that a similar circumstance where you're from, Miss Harry? Sometimes she has connectivity issues. Anybody has any other broader experience to bring from maybe observations when you go abroad that you'd like to bring to bear on this discussion?
So I could give you an example of well, Grenada have that relationship with China,
Uh huh.
so a lot of the times we have a lot of students here going to China and study,
Right.
and most of them after finishing their studies they decide to stay in China.
Yeah.
But
Better opportunities, I guess.
the only job they can really get is teaching English in sometimes preschools or if maybe if possible at school.
Secondary
But
school.
but yeah, but that's it. Like they would go and study mechanic or whatever, and
Hmm.
seldomly they would get any job in along that aspect just
Yeah.
because of yeah
Well, remember the
race.
demand in China and
Yeah, it's very great
Japan
too.
is very large. So,
Yeah,
if you are there and you're able to learn Chinese or Cantonese, as the case might be, because there's no language called Chinese. Um, if you learn Cantonese or what's the other language in China?
I think it's Mandarin or some
Mandarin,
man.
right?
Yeah,
So if you learn either of those primary languages, and I think Cantonese has become more predominant, then it gives you the ability to translate from that language to English because one of the problems that the Chinese have is actually bringing to bear more critical numbers of individuals who are able to communicate both in English and Chinese or Cantonese or Mandarin. Right? That is one of the areas that they know they have to invest in, which is why they will be willing to take people who just completed a degree, especially in a master's program of mechanics or engineering and so on, and keep them there. And they make money. Yeah, they get paid pretty good as well. Because when they come back to Grenada, how many engineers can Grenada really um, employ? You understand?
that is true.
Right? And that is one of the problems when education becomes available and people are able to readily avail themselves of qualifications, it creates gluts on the market, which is what kind of happened here in Trinidad, where with the GATE program, lots of people were able to avail themselves of degree programs, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and even masters and stuff. So now you have a situation that Anthony was actually looking at is that people in different walks of life suddenly have MBAs and acquired master's programs or master degrees and bachelors in various topics and areas, and there is no need for them or there's no more space for them in the market space. So they find themselves working in jobs where sometimes to be able to get a job, they have to not they have to say they're not qualified because I know in the police service that I have come across many guys with higher level degrees, and they have not declared that in the service. Interestingly enough, um, anybody um, anybody has similar circumstance with that? No. All right. The challenge that leaders are going to face is to actually put this into place. And remember, we talked about this before. To be inclusive means we have to dismantle our own um, barriers that we may have, either barriers that we inherited, barriers that were developed with us as we were growing up, in terms of how we thought about people, valued the people coming from these diversities. It's something that requires reflection. You have to think about very carefully all the different people that you may come across, all the different cultures you might engage with, and begin to perceive how you are likely to respond to these individuals. If you know you have specific issues from an ethnic background, from a political background, from a gender or sexual orientation, you need to work hard on breaking down those particular barriers that you normally would put up. That is the challenge that leadership requires, and of course they're going to speak to the particular manner in which you should go about engaging that. Yes, thought as much. Harry's having problems. Politics. All right. Not seeing a lot of these. Yeah. Thought Aisha was having some problems. All right. So, um, now the reason why we need to be able to be inclusive is that in order to build your support base, you're going to want to be able to open yourself to including people rather than excluding them. So that's going to be the importance of doing it. So developing the skills necessary for that will be developing empathy, developing empathic listening, improving your communication skills, engaging first and foremost with the likely challenges you have as an individual towards other people with the type of differences that might come to you, and try to make sure that you are paying attention to how you're responding to them. That's going to be really important. Now, there's a reason why we want to be inclusive. We want to be inclusive because the way in which whose life is different to yours, whose experiences are different to yours, the way in which they see an issue or problem is likely to be unique to you. And if we are able to bring their perception on board, it's it's going to afford you a view that you're not capable of bringing yourself. Now, this is, if you remember the picture I showed you of the 6 and the 9 and the people standing, um, looking at the same number lying on the ground, and their perceptions are leading to that. This is where it goes a little beyond that, because if you are a homosexual man operating and working in Trinidad and Tobago, the way in which you view the world around you is going to be distinctly different to somebody who is non heterosexual individual operating in the same environment. The way in which they're going to view issues and problems in society will be different to the way you might be able to look at it as a heterosexual individual. Just a simple difference like that. And if we do not allow, as a leader, the contribution from that person to help shape our perception of the world in which we exist, then you're weakening your position and you're not being inclusive. So the challenge is to be inclusive. Now, a lot of people have a problem in terms of of okay, so you come from a religious background which frowns upon that type of activity, but does that mean that that person doesn't exist? Are we to chop them out of our lives? Are we to chop them out of our society? Because I mean, that was the kind of thinking that led to the Holocaust. All right, here comes Aisha again. Hi, Aisha. See you having some issues. All right, still having issues. All right. So the point I was trying to make here is that if we don't appreciate the way in which people around us who walk different types of lives look at things and brings to bear on the situation that we're facing, then we are cheating ourselves of another view of the world that might be more perceptive than ours. That at least will see it from a different position and point of view. Um, and we'd be worse off for it, not better off. But the problem is when these things conflict, when this action of inclusivity conflict with a ethical value we may hold, coming from a belief structure that we've grown up in, environment that we've grown up in, that starts to create a sort of turmoil in us, um, which we refer to as cognitive dissonance, because you view something as being wrong, but you have to engage with the person. Now, engaging with somebody who might think along those lines, you might start to think, well, if I talk to that person and I engage with that person, does it mean that I am condoning what they're doing, um, or I am opening myself up to some form of influence, negative influence from them? Those are things that are going to cross your mind. Those are things you're going to have to engage with. All right, you all following what I'm talking about? This is where the challenge of inclusiveness is a problem, because it causes us to have to 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 challenge some of the things that we've accepted without question as being what is right and what is wrong. It will cause us to have to challenge that. All right, this point here. Um, there have been cases in where large parts of cultures have been ignored because the dominant cultural norms in our society pushes those to the side. So what you have a situation of is, consider for example the in the United States in particular, the case of the first peoples, the Indians, the Native Americans or the Native Indians, and how their culture was snuffed out. Interestingly enough, in Trinidad, we have a similar situation where we have the culture of our first peoples here. The well, not it's not the Arabs and Caribs, but the um, anybody knows the proper names of it? I can never remember it.
Tainos and Kalinagos.
Yeah, right. So those individuals, their culture has been largely to a great extent ignored, pushed aside, and whatever was seen as being important and sacred to them has been trampled upon. Um, and very few of us have actually paid attention or done anything to help them. You all familiar with some of the issues that First Peoples have been dealing with or treating with here in Trinidad? Wow, interesting. Anybody here from? Well, I know Ned is from environmental. It's environmental management you did, right, Ned?
Environmental health.
Right. Did you by chance visit the Arepa savannas here in Trinidad?
Which Havana?
Arepo
So,
savannas.
no, I don't.
All right. Let me ask
I can't
a
remember.
broader. All right. Let me ask a broader selection of the class. How many people here are familiar with the Arepo savannas in Trinidad? Cindy, tell me, can you open your mic and tell us where, in what context you are aware of the Oripo savannas?
I think at in primary school I had an outing
To go there.
um to go to, yeah,
Hmm.
basically that.
So, what are the Oripo savannas that you remember?
But basically from my experience I know about the scenery and the different flora I've
Uh huh.
seen there.
Okay. Yeah, but what was significant about the Oripo savannas?
Uh, Honestly I cannot quite remember. It's been years.
Yeah, okay. So I guess you were either very young,
Yeah,
so
it
you
was in
forgot.
primary school.
Anybody else is familiar with the Oripo savannas? Okay. So the Oripo savannas is a very fragile part of our environment here in Trinidad. It is called a savannas because it suffers from desert. Uh, it suffers from a form of desertification, and as a result, the yeah, okay. See somebody putting something in the trust about the wildfowl trust, right? As a result of that environment, it created a um, it had an impact upon the flora and fauna that exists there. One of which was plants that became carnivorous. So they have a version of the Venus flytrap that exists there that eats meat proteins in the form of insects in particular, um, to survive because they're unable to get water, significant quantities of water during parts of the year, and therefore the plants and animals had to adjust to that circumstances. Now, what's happening with the those places in Trinidad is that with the expansion of road networks, they're cutting into the areas surrounding the Ripo savannas, and it's causing a lot of unplanned squatting and development to take place in those areas. And including that is the what are referred to as the Turu forest, and those areas are under threat. And they were declared as national parks in the past. But although it being declared as a national park and a part of the national resources, there's very little enforcement of the protection for those places. And they're kind of critical to our water tables and those kind of things. So those are things that we have to pay attention to. So as a member of Trinidad, if you are going to be, taking part in, being inclusive in nature, we have to also think from a cultural standpoint as well, because there are cultural issues that come up as a result of how they look at the world around them. And if we only take on the ideas and concepts from the dominant cultures that exist in our society, and we don't embrace those non-traditional cultures, then we are at a loss, and we are not being inclusive in nature. That those are things that we have to pay attention to. All right, let me see. Anything else of importance here? Consensus models. All right. So, in terms of how decision making comes about in your organization, one of the models that we have a tendency to fall to is democratic voting, when we're trying to make a decision, and that actually is probably one of the poorest ways to do it. And this comes about because in a voting or democratic system, what you end up doing is the majority rules. So if we have a class of 30 people and 16 people vote for one thing, and the balance, um, 14 people vote otherwise, what ends up happening is that you have 16 people's decision overriding the decisions of the 14 others. You all follow what's happening there? Yes? So you have in a class of 30, 14 people who are left dissatisfied by a decision that was taken about the organization's direction or the class's direction. Now, the problem that we have to realize here is that do you perceive that a problem will exist moving forward? If these 14 people out of a class of 30 are dissatisfied with the decision that's been taken. Any of y'all?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could have dramatic repercussions for the further working of the class. All right. Now, the issue that you need to choose here, if we use a consensus building model, then it's likely that we will have to spend more time in trying to explain to people our position and also in listening to why they disagreed. We might have been able to come to a better decision. Remember, we talked about this when we were dealing with chaos theory in the last thing. Instead of either or, we start doing and both. Let's choose or make a decision that's inclusive of other people's positions as well, will help us to build a consensus model where the vast majority will agree, not with everything, but the majority of what we decide to do. But not only that, we all agree, despite not agreeing to everything, at least part of what I would like to see is there. So I will commit myself to working together with others to get the goals accomplished. Consensus building models make for much better decision making. Um, but the problem with consensus building is that it's a longer process than all voting. A sort of democratic approach is, the problem is it creates its exclusive its nature because we had a vote and we don't want those people, so just alienate those folks from the process. That's also one of the things. All right. Now, inclusiveness also has to include people not within the organization itself, but the people who are impacted by the decisions and actions of that group. We refer to those people as shareholders and stakeholders. They're both external to the group and they have a share in the interest of what's going on and they are impacted by what is taking place by the organization. We need to also be inclusive of those individuals, even though they're not directly involved with what we do. And um, it's important that we take into consideration what their take is on what we do. So, the best example I can give to you guys is here in the college. The student body, for faculty and administration, the student body is one of our shareholders. Um, they are important because they are an active output of the organization. But your employers are stakeholders because they benefit from the training that we do. So in order for us to engage in meaningful dialogue with shareholders and stakeholders, oftentimes you'd find us engaging in what we refer to as, um, and some of you might have done this recently as we were going through the accreditation process another time. Um, we would have done some form of outreach and do questionnaires with stakeholders and shareholders, and you all get it every semester. Actually, you all have to participate in um, performance evaluation for the programs. You all do that. By the way, you all take part in those things every time they come up. Course
I
evaluation.
do. Yes,
Mostly.
I do.
Most Alex. Right.
I do
The
it all the
one
time.
you do it all the time. Yes, the one time you get your say, you don't say. That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Sometimes we have open forums where we invite shareholders and stakeholders to come in and make statements or to get an idea of what we're trying to do and give their opinions on it. For most of the programs, we have something called a program advisory committee that we meet with to engage with any sort of changes to the programs that we're trying to develop to ensure that their input is taken into consideration because again the they have a vested interest in making sure we are doing the things that they need as employers um, for the field to work or the training to work for them. So it takes a lot more work to engage with shareholders and stakeholders outside of the organization. But good organizations, good leaders would do that in order to ensure that the decision making is not having a negative impact on people outside of the organization directly. So those are things that you find would need to take place as a result. So we have to be able to include those individuals. So when we're talking about engaging with stakeholders and shareholders, this is the type of perspective you're going to get in terms of feedback you're going to get. So you have degree of importance to the stakeholder versus the perspective or stand on the issue. So if it's of low importance to the stakeholder or shareholder, then getting some form of feedback from them is going to be outright um, problematic because responsiveness is going to be limited. If there's high opposition to it but low importance, it creates a problematic area. If it's of high support, then it's low priority. Um, Most organizations probably want to have things more in the low priority areas. If, however, it's of high importance to the stakeholders and there's high levels of opposition, that's going to create an antagonistic type of response from them. As opposed to that, if it's of high importance and they're highly supportive of that change, then they're going to be supportive. So the idea is to try to put people in places and evaluate them based upon where they're likely to fall, based upon the concepts. So some of the ideas that we might go to the program advisory committee might be of low importance to them, but we really do need to get an idea of where they fall with it. It even though it might be low priority to them or problematic to them, we still need to take into consideration what are their issues and what would they prefer to see. Those are the things that we have to pay attention to. So again, this is one way of evaluating external groups to the organization. All right, empowerment. The 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 video that we looked at spoke about the relational leadership being developed around being empowering. Empowering is important because for you to be a good leader, you have to empower others to be able to do the things you want them to do, which means you are empowering them in terms of are willing to take ownership of the organization and what's taking place in the organization and be feel as if this is my responsibility and I want to work in this organization. This is why they talk about the two dimensions here. The sense of self that claims ownership and claims a place in the process and expects to be involved. So we're not waiting. We want people to jump at the opportunities that they're provided. And two, set up the environmental conditions that promote full involvement by participation by reducing the barriers that block the development of individual talent and involvement. So, one, creating a sense of self or a sense of urgency within the individuals, and two, setting up an environment that contributes and supports that type of activity. So, it's really important as a leader that we go about empowering all of the individuals and taking down any of the barriers that exist for empowering the people within our organization. This is why this becomes so important. So let's move away from this because empowering will also bring up the concept of power and authority, and there's a group that's going to deal with this in a lot more detail in terms of empowerment. Suffice it to say that the relational leadership model is positioned upon the leader empowering the people within his organization to take on leadership positions and to take up leadership in the future. So it's almost like servant leadership. You are providing circumstances, situations, and leading the way for other people to want to take up those leadership positions, not for you to hold on to the position and stay there regardless of whether or not you're effective or not. As a leader, you are going to create future leaders. That's what empowerment does. And you're going to empower them through a number of different activities. You're going to empower them by your own training, by providing training for them, by simply giving them. I think there's a list of things that somebody else will deal with this in their thing on power and influence. Um, so we have a list of things that you can do for self empowerment. All right. So education. So as a leader, these are the things that you could utilize to assist others to become self-empowered, right? So education, that's you're learning about things on your own and coming to new information. Leading others, structuring the environment, structuring your activities to be able to create that self-empowerment, providing opportunities for others and the resources that they require to be able to take up positions of self-empowerment, mentoring other people, and then of course acting upon all those things that we talked about before. Those are the things that you should be utilizing to help to get other people in the organization and let them develop a sense of wanting to take ownership, wanting to assist, to take control, and wanting to eventually become um, uh, involved with the organization and take on the challenge. Which means what we want to do in essence is we want to make everybody feel as if what they feel and think about the organization as matter. It matters to them, and this is where the concept of mattering and marginality come up. If you feel that how you feel matters to the organization, you're going to feel involved and inclusive and empowered. However, if you feel as if you are marginalized by the organization, you are likely to not want to take any sort of risk or you're not going to want to do anything in the organization because you fear being further marginalized in the organization. This often happens with people in an organization who are at what we refer to as the lower ends of the organizational structure. This is especially with a structure that is highly um, hierarchical in nature. So you have people like messengers, cleaners, uh, drivers, that type of individual in the lineup, even like first response officers and stuff like that. Those people are seen as expendable and they are easily marginalized. So what they think doesn't matter. And if that's the way you go about looking at people in your organization, and you make them feel as if they are marginal people, then that's how you're going to start excluding people from the organization. So you're not empowering people if you do that. If what you have to do to make people to provide empowerment is to make people understand that how they feel and what they think matters to you and matters to the organization. So that's the benefit that we have to talk about. Of course, we spoke about developing empowerment in environments, and this has to do with, being, first of all, realizing that leadership is not about you, but it's about everybody else and the relationship you've developed, and the fact that you're providing opportunities for other people to take up leadership positions in your absence. Because if you think about it, nobody's going to live forever. You're not going to run the organization further. It's impractical in nature. If you don't provide people with skills to take up your position and move the organization forward after you're not there, whether it is physically or you pass on from this mortal realm, um, trust me, the organization will crumble with you But if you're looking at setting up an organization that will continue beyond you, then you have to ensure that the people coming around you or coming below you or with you are able to move forward with the concept, right? Or else upon your death, so the company goes. Understand? All right. So those empowering environments you have to work to create. Um, think about all those family businesses that cease to exist after the death of the person who set it up. Um, think about it. I mean, there are lots of businesses outside there that after the parent or parents die who set up the organization, the company organization failed because they simply did not provide the skills necessary to ensure that the business had continuity, that the organization had continuity. And that's simply because there was no empowerment taking place within the organization. All right. This actually happens a lot with family businesses. All right. So there's lots about empowerment that we're going to talk about. And of course, the biggest thing here is about ethical and moral leadership. This is critical because especially given what we saw in the latter part of the 20, let's say from 2006 to now, we've seen and experienced many circumstances and situations where leaders have done things that are questionable in terms of ethical and moral standards. Relational leadership speaks to the need for us to be, have some very high ethical values and standards, and it speaks to that being a shared value between all members of the organization. And it's not just something that we speak to, but we live with or live to. Um, but it's not the kind of ethical and moral values that create exclusiveness or promotes any sort of negativity. It's about something that is strong enough so that you have a very principled type of activity, but simultaneously you are in being inclusive, you're being empowering, you're doing all the things that are required of you in terms of this model, the five part model that we keep on talking about here. So being understanding where your ethical values are. This is why understanding self is going to be a critical element, which is why it starts the next set of chapters in terms of the process itself. You need to know where you're coming from with your own value structure, your own ethical values and stuff like that, because you can't make changes and improvements if necessary without understanding first where you are and determining, of course, if those standards of behavior, those ethical values are uniform enough or universal enough for us to move into the world around us and for us to do. So there's a whole set of stuff about ethics, and there's a whole sets of chapters about this that the groups will be presenting in terms of the ethics, ethical decision making. And some of your midterm reflections are going to be based upon that in terms of ethical values and where we start to get into this. So the leadership model is going to ask us to take those ethical decisions, understand where we stand in terms of our ethical values, and it means that we are going to be bringing to bear those things in commonality with those around us. All right. So um, all of the decisions that you're going to be making in your leadership decisions must be values driven, meaning that you want to make sure that everything you do and every decision that you make, you're making it with everybody else in mind and with your values and that type of stuff in front of you. And if you make that decision there, it shouldn't be different um, because of different circumstances in the future. It should be consistent across the board when we're trying to make those things. Now, it's kind of simply stated, But again, the importance of ethical values has come up because of questionable leadership decisions in the past, where the ethics of the circumstances and situations was questionable, especially when we start to look back at the Enron decisions. We had the Bernie Madoff types of thing. We had that guy from St. Vincent, was it? With the 2020 competition. Sandiford, I think his name was. Um, all those guys, indicated, that if you are making massive decisions about doing things, but you're cutting corners when it comes to ethical values and standards, then you are exhibiting exactly what you're going to end up doing. So, I mean, those are the things that come to bear with us across the board. And it really does influence us in the long run because regardless of how much you try to hide what you're really thinking, it eventually comes forward as some of you may have experienced with people around and or you've seen happen around us. So this is especially true with leadership and government and political values. There's a paucity of individuals in those organizations who claim one thing but behave absolutely in another way. And it doesn't seem to matter which country you go to. It seems to be the same thing over and over again, like a never-ending decimal. All right, so we can leave ethics alone because you all are going to be dealing with that in more detail. Leading by example, this is related to ethical values because again, you can't. There's a phrase that says you can't lead by what you say. You have to lead by what you do. I think there's a quotation on that somewhere. Here it is. What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. This is from Emerson. This is such an important thing because this is how children really see us. Because they clearly follow what we do, regardless of what we say. And if there is divergence between what we say and what we do, that incongruency is going to create problems for you moving forward. So that's why your ethical values and standards have to be consistent across the board. All right, that's why we have to be paying attention to that. So you all will deal with this in a lot more details. And this is the last area here is about that relational leadership is process oriented. Now everything we talked about needs to be process oriented in us in order for two things. One, we're likely to get a successful result, and two, we can repeat the exercise and get similar results in the future. That's the reality of process orientation. And running things through a process makes it repeatable, and you can easily teach that process to other people around us. It's not a mystery that people make the good decisions. It's not a mystery that people have high standards. It's not a mystery that you're inclusive, but you're process oriented, and that process can be passed on to other people. And that's what the whole relational leadership model is based on, being process oriented. Anybody who understands what being process oriented means, it means that you can teach other people how you got about. So that's why when I asked Jada about her egg salad, that's something she could teach to everybody in class, um, if she understands the process. If she doesn't understand the process and she's willy nilly just throwing things all over the place, um, and sometimes it looks that way. When you look at how chefs in particular behave in a kitchen, they seem to be doing things willy nilly. But if you really take time and pay attention to what they're doing, you'd see a process there. But if we break it down clearly to show other people what the process is in terms of doing things, it's sort of like, working on an assignment. When you ask me questions on how to do an assignment, I have to identify the process for you to help you to navigate your way through an assignment to a successful end. Okay, that is an important element that has to be repeatable. Now I've done this class numerous times. I am pretty certain of a lot of the elements that go into what makes the process successful. So therefore, my purpose here is to guide you through the various processes that you have to engage in to try and work with the material that you have available here. So that's the whole thing about um, being process oriented. Process orientation means you are able to repeat and get the same results, or if not, repeat and fix the results that you had in the past. All right. And well, when you're designing the process, make sure it involves people, not devalues people. So, um, process orientation means you are processing around people, not machines. I used to have a friend I used to play music with, and used to always say, if I could have just programmed everybody, we wouldn't have any problems, you know. And that again is going to speak to another aspect, which is where the team that's the team that's going to present on groups and teams is going to treat it. How do we work with groups and teams, and how do we engage with the obvious conflicts that arise? That is something that we have to learn to work with. And again, it's process oriented. How do we work with groups? And how do we work successfully with groups? How do we make teams? How do we successfully make teams? Those are the types of processes that we want to go through again. So every aspect of the model is process oriented. They talk about making, and in the process it has to be meaningful. So when we're doing these things, like for example, when you go through the exercise of your self-analysis, it must be meaningful to you. If you're just doing it because so say to do it, and I had to write about my father and my mother and my granny and my, if it doesn't make meaning to you, then don't do it, because you won't be able to develop the self-analysis and the deep understanding and appreciation of who you are and how you've arrived at being the person you are today if you don't go through the exercise in a meaningful manner. So the process, though it is repeatable, it requires that you do it with meaning and with effort. So this is the point that we're trying to make here. All right. So we kind of come to the end of the process of it here. Anybody has any questions that they'd like to go about? There are other elements about cooperation and collaboration. You all could read up on this by going through the slides and kind of looking at the slides a little bit on your own. But I'm approaching 8:30, and I don't want to keep you all very late today, given that tomorrow's a holiday. I'd like people to, utilize their time frame accordingly. Any questions, concerns that you have about what we're looking at here? Because next week we have our first set of presentations that I'm going to be marking. um, so, any questions, concerns that you have? No? All right. So, um, this is the website that what I'll do is I'll put a copy of the thingamajig in the a copy of the website on the WhatsApp chat so that you guys can look at it if you need to. All right. Okay. See some messages here. All right. No questions, no concerns. Everybody's okay? All right.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Ned, what's the question?
No, I'm just saying yes, we're okay, we're okay.
All right. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now. All right.